Good morning, everybody. I've got 8:45.
No. Hey.
Good morning.
Yeah. Well,
Nice to see you all. Welcome to the autumn. Let's begin with the time of centering and quiet to welcome this day, to welcome this opportunity, to welcome one another, and to welcome ourselves. I invite you to be comfortable in your chair or sofa, wherever you are. To breathe deeply a few times. And to simply say to yourself, welcome. We welcome eternal infinite spirit. We welcome this day. We welcome our neighbor. We welcome this circle. We welcome our congregation. We welcome ourselves as individuals. Breathe in, welcome. Breathe out, welcome. In, and out. I'd like to give a special shout out to the co-chairs of Spiritual Enrichment for 2022-23, and they are Annie K. Taylor and Greg Rosados. Thank you. Today's agenda, it's a simple one. We're going to do two things. One is to go through this year's Sunday morning activity, and then entertain any questions, feedback that you might have. But then we're going to ask you, so you can begin thinking about it now, what were some of your summer activities that specifically spoke to you in a spiritual way, that really gave you a sense of connection to wider, broader, more eternal, more lasting things? Don't answer now, just start thinking, what were some of your activities in the summer by yourself or with others, inside, outside, that really brought you a spiritual insight of the nature and meaning of life, the presence of God, a particular sense of healing, forgiveness, renewal, any of those things. Okay. Okay, here we are. Let's read together the description of our ministry. Spiritual enrichment. Let's read together. Spiritual enrichment is done ministry of exploration and formation. And can we read our mission together? Enriching minds, expanding faith, transforming hearts. Sit with that for just a moment. And our value statement. We believe that the spiritual journey is a lifelong process.
Throughout our years, we continue to explore deep questions, examine ethical challenges, and grow in wisdom, compassion, faith, and connection with others. We grow by drawing on our Christian heritage, the wisdom of the ages, the inner spark of our own spirit, and being recognized and heard in thoughtful conversation with others. Thank you.
Hold on to some of that for a moment. Anything in there that sparks comment that you are inspired to share?
Independent thinking.
It's not ours. Not ours until we choose it. So we make it our own, right?
We're transformed.
Yeah.
Heard in thoughtful conversation.
I like the emphasis on community and others.
On community. Hmm? And others.
And like faith and compassion.
Mhm.
I guess for me, I'm a person who learns best through experience. And I see enriching minds, transforming hearts, explore deep questions, examine ethical challenges. I don't see a direct experience.
Mm.
That's a good insight. Thank you. Especially embodied. Right?
I don't know what you mean by embody. What I mean is within the context of this hour, creating experiences and sharing experiences as a way of expanding our faith.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, by embodied, I meant the kind of breathing that we did at the beginning, kind of recognition that we are incarnated human beings.
That's one way.
Yeah. Thank you, JS. That's a good addition. So let's look through our yearly schedule. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you. By the way, we came to this schedule through a process. It didn't just arise all of a sudden by divine inspiration. Although we'll say there's divine inspiration throughout. We gathered ideas on the last Sunday we were together, the 22nd of May. And then I think we put out a call for more ideas. Then Greg, NEK, and I met a couple of times, started to really sift and sort and weigh what would be best use of our time in 22-23. We had a gathering of all those who were interested in the summer to kind of go over that, and then have arrived at this final form. By the way, there's one Sunday that's open in May.
I have a speaker for that.
You have a
On the
speaker for that, good.
Yes.
Well, and there's another member of our circle, she's not here today, who had a suggestion for that day. So that day's up for grabs. So next week and the week after that, this is what we'll be doing. Vince and I happen to live in one of the most unique neighborhoods in Illinois, maybe the Midwest, maybe the country. One of the only subdivision cooperatives ever attempted. Post-war intentional open housing community for people of all races, religions, social backgrounds, economic backgrounds, to live together in intentional community, where you're not just concerned about yourself, you're concerned about your neighbors. Imagine that. The community existed as a cooperative from 1946 until about 2010. It is no longer an official cooperative, but for all those years, the community went through many ups and downs and challenges, especially at the beginning, when there was overt opposition in very conservative, white DuPage County, which was questioning what are all these people, all these different backgrounds doing over there, and living in intentional community. One of the people, when Vince and I moved there, I was talking to a clergy person, friend of mine, who said, who happened to know about our community. I did not know its history at this time. We had already bought the house before we knew what we were moving into. And this clergy person, friend of mine, who lived in nearby Villa Park, said, "Oh, I know where you're moving into. That's the old hippie commune." And I said, "It's the what?" It's a unique neighborhood though, and even though the co-op no longer exists, there is still a very clear sense of responsibility for one another and just social support and love for one another that is unique. So there's a documentary that's been made about the neighborhood. There's a link to it here. You can just go to YouTube and find it. The title is Common Good, a Urban-Centered Co-op Story. But the plan is next week we'll watch half of the documentary and then talk about it. 2 weeks from today, the second half, and talk about it. And each time, Doris Dornberger, who's the current president of our neighborhood, and Joyce Castle, former member of the neighborhood who was involved in all those years, will be with us to answer questions.
Oh, that's neat.
And the goal here is to learn about the joys and challenges of intentional shared living. I mean, every day wasn't a walk in the park in these 40, 50, 60 years. And it did eventually dissolve. So we'll talk about all of that. So on October 2nd, Shelley Longmuir, a member of our congregation, will share her spiritual journey with us. October 9th and 16th, by the way, one of the things that's guided our agenda this year is, since I will be retiring at the end of January, we were thinking about the things that are of interest to me to share, as it is sort of the final opportunity for you to do so. Many of you know that I was a missionary for 6 years in Zimbabwe, and I encountered firsthand this phenomenon of AICs, traditionally called African Independent Churches, also called African Instituted Churches, African Initiated Churches, and African, another one, Indigenous Churches. They all conveniently are AICs. So I worked in a more traditional, what you would recognize our church in Zimbabwe in its structure, the architecture, the physicality of it. You would recognize the structure of the service, structure of leadership. It would be very familiar to you because it was founded by missionaries from New England, from congregational churches in New England. But alongside that familiar kind of Christianity in Africa are the AICs, which in most cases were never under the guidance of a European, North American, Australian missionary society, and have always been more able then to incorporate the local culture, the concerns of the local culture, and so on. So the AICs are very interesting because they show how flexible, adaptable Christianity is. Everywhere it seems to be planted around the world, it seems to bring in and speak to local cultures, not just drums and costumes and so on, but things that are important to that culture. In Africa, such as healing, for example, that's probably the most important one. Physical healing and emotional healing, relational healing. Speak about an embodied faith, physical healing. So we're going to take 2 weeks on that. There's a lot there. I reached out to a scholar at Baylor, Philip Jenkins, and he said, "You know, that's a mistake to try to do that in 2 weeks." He said, "You better serve the people by maybe just taking one African Independent Church, looking at it." So we're going to do the stupid thing and do all of them. No, not all of them. We're gonna do an overview, try to do a comprehensive view of African independent churches. They're found all throughout Africa. And I'd like to speak to you, Andrew, about that sometime. See what your knowledge of that is from West Africa. Okay. Thanks. August 23rd and the 30th, we're gonna do two films by Martin Doublemeyer on Abraham Joshua Heschel. One of the great interfaith, mystical, scholarly figures of the 20th century. To say nothing of him being a rabbi. He really has always brought forth so much, and his passing left us one light less. And yet he's not that terribly well known. And so Martin Doublemeyer has this way of shining a light on lesser known figures of the Christian and religious world, such as Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Howard Thurman, Reinhold Niebuhr. We have over the years watched films by Martin Doublemeyer on those people. This is his film on Abraham Joshua Heschel. We'll watch half of it on the 23rd and discuss, and half of it on the 30th. Before we go further, any questions, comments? Yep.
Will these be recorded so we can see them if we can't make it on a certain day?
Yes, as long as copyright allows. So for example, when we watched the film about my neighborhood, that's from YouTube. And I think YouTube does not allow that. But it's available on YouTube for free. So we may only be able to record the conversation. The Heschel film is probably likewise. This is a commercial film, so we can't just broadcast it on our YouTube channel.
You put the link up.
It's a commercial film, so someone would have to buy it. Yeah, yeah. So it's best to be here in person.
And we bought it.
Not yet, but I will. And then it goes on my computer. You're welcome to come and watch it on my computer. I don't know how to share that link with others. I'd have to ask the owners for permission. My computer does belong to the church. Another interest of mine is the spiritual lives of the nuns, not the ones that wear those black clothes, not the habits, but those who are not in the habit of coming to church or affiliating with any religion. And this is a growing number of Americans. It may be even a global phenomenon, but this is a new thing in the United States. Somewhere between a third and now 40% of all young people under the age of 40, don't affiliate. If you ask them what religion are you, like this one, this one, this one, this one, and then there's a nun, they would choose none. That's why they're called nuns. I am very interested in this group of people, not so that we can get them to join an organized religion, but so that we can understand their spiritual needs, their material needs, again, speaking about an embodied faith. But also how to bring folks together for community. That's one thing that is lacking for folks who are not affiliated with the organized religion, is the people who gather around ritual and story and song and spiritual practice, otherwise known as organized religion. How can that need be met for people who are not probably going to walk into a synagogue, mosque, church?
So on these boxes, they might check was atheist. So these are people who are also not atheists. I'm just trying to.
Some nuns may describe themselves as atheists, others will not.
Agnostic.
Or agnostic. Many people who are not affiliated with an organized religion are deeply spiritual and even have a belief in some kind of God, higher power, spiritual being, spiritual values, etc. I interviewed for my spiritual companionship program. I interviewed one of our neighbors, a young neighbor of ours, who is not interested in organized religion. I asked her a host of questions about her beliefs. She had no belief in God necessarily, but a very strong belief in heaven. And I don't mean to say that, well, that doesn't make sense. I just mean to say that the spiritual lives of nuns is complex. And
Yeah, I was going to say there are hosts of people who aren't part of an organized religion who take their spiritual practices extremely seriously.
including meditation, yoga, tai chi, etc. Okay. There's a book that we'll look at, or I'll distill for you in that series of sessions. November 20th, Pastor Tyler will share his spiritual journey. During Advent, there are the 4 Sundays, hope, peace, joy, and love on each of the Sundays of Advent. We'll take one of those, one that fits that Sunday, and we'll consider what does it mean to live that, to experience that, to use J.S.'s good language, to experience that spiritual aspect within ourselves, between ourselves, and in the world. We'll be using some of the material that comes from the work of the people, video material that we used last year. December 25th and January 1st, unless you really want to come to church, we'll probably take those days off.
Can I backtrack and volunteer to take joy during Advent?
Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you, J.S. You are hired. The check's in the mail. Julie McConnell spent a week as vice chair of our congregation at the Kellogg School at Northwestern with other faith leaders, lay and clergy, learning about trends as the church comes out of COVID. And I thought that would be we thought that would be a great opportunity for us to hear what she learned. 2 Sundays in January will be about another thing that fascinates me, and I think a lot of you, I hope. How do we relate to people who have a completely different worldview than ours? People who think that we've fallen hook, line, and sinker for a false narrative about our world and society. And we think that they likewise are running after misinformation, fake news. This film, Behind the Curve, is fascinating. It's about Americans who believe and organize around the principle of a flat earth. Yes, there are people who believe that the earth is flat. These are not people who live on another planet or in some uneducated corner of somewhere. They're folks who have found community in one another and have found a sense of individual purpose and meaning in believing that the earth is flat and not understanding why other people don't see the obvious truth that the earth is flat. So documentarian followed this group around, some individuals in the entire group for a couple of years, made this fascinating film about them. It becomes a window into helping us understand how people could believe something despite facts, reason, and so on, and how they look at us likewise. How can you possibly believe that, what you believe? And maybe how we can have conversation with each other, despite the obvious challenge. What do you think?
Wow.
I can't, it's hard to read your faces today.
Only 2 sessions?
Yeah, right. So we'll watch half the film, discuss it, and then.
Well,
Yeah.
about the on that is to what degree does the social media play in sort of a philosophy
the thoughts that were relatively isolated before, but now have become, shared widely. And
Right.
therefore, people find community. where they
Right.
do them.
So in your basement, all by yourself, you can find all kinds of fascinating things and feel connected to a truth that you understand, but most people don't, which is kind of power, and also connected to other people that you share this unique bond with. That produces all kinds of emotional payoff. Okay. 29th of January is my last Sunday on staff here, not my last Sunday on earth. And I thought it'd be interesting to look back at the 5 years that I served here, 5.5 years at that point, and what we've covered and celebrated. 2 weeks on evangelicalism are to follow. That topic kept coming up last fall when we surveyed the circle about topics of interest. And it also came up on May 22nd when we asked you for interesting things to talk about. Evangelicalism is like the previous topic of flat earthers in that people who are not evangelical look at evangelical and say, how can you possibly think that, believe that, act that way, have those values? Don't you know, don't you know, don't you know? Evangelicals look at non-evangelical Christians especially and ask exactly the same question. The call here is for understanding. The best way to understand is to just begin with basic facts. Where did this movement come from? How does it operate in our society? Before I leave, I'm going to attempt to find a scholar who can speak from a neutral balcony view about evangelicalism in America. Try this theory on. All Protestants are to some extent evangelicals. What is Protestantism all about?
Protesting.
Protesting, that's right. Okay. In a more positive sense.
Well, that is could be thought.
Right, because the Catholic Church was understood to be this way, but we're going to be this way being grace through faith, spiritual movement, individual as well as corporate, and solo scriptura, scripture alone, scripture alone. What does our covenant at WCC say? God's blessed word of truth, as it will be revealed to us by God's blessed word of truth. Try that on. We're a little bit evangelical. I know, and you're pushing back here. I think. That's good. By February 19th, there may be a new pastor here in my position. If so, we'll give them an opportunity to share their spiritual journey. Then we have 6 weeks of Lent. As we had an Advent series, we're going to have a Lenten series. This series was suggested by one of our members that we take the Lord's Prayer and look at it not academically so much as spiritually. Take a phrase and really spend time each week with one of those 6 phrases in the Lord's Prayer and ask really, how does it operate inside of us and in our daily living and in our communal living, perhaps as a congregation? How do we experience that in our daily living? Easter will be off. The green team will have these 4 weeks, and they have, this year, I thought the green team sessions were awesome. They're always awesome. This year I thought things went very well those weeks. And then a wrap up on May 21st. Feedback, questions, concerns?
Looks great.
Wow.
Excellent.
If those of you online, please chime in if you'd like.
Who has stepped forward to be you in your absence?
In my absence,
Well, your retirement.
my retirement, well, there
Not being here.
is no pastor call at this time. There's a process. I don't even know what the process is.
I
Can
guess
we
I meant
come out
for-
to your place, maybe?
My place?
Maybe it'd be worth it.
I don't know.
After the conference.
I guess that
Greg and any case, you want to speak to that? in any way? Like,
The process?
well, no, like, how you envision that transition? To the extent that you've given it any thought.
Well, I think the word transition is exactly right. We had conceived that Greg and I could be co-controllers. And we will be spending our first semester with Jeffrey in tutelage. So that's part of it, certainly. And then as the new pastor gets up to speed and feels comfortable, we think it would be fabulous to allow him or her that opportunity. Or they.
I think one of our challenges, as someone who sits in this seat, is to run the technology and move the meeting. I'm comfortable with that, mostly, usually, but that's, ideally, maybe that's a two-person job. Facilitator is one job, running the Zoom meeting, and not just the Zoom part, but the audio visuals and so on is another. I haven't always been smooth with that, you may have noticed. But it's been adequate, I hope. But I think that will be, I think, a cheap consideration. How
I think I've gotten over my PTSD from remote learning by now, so I probably
ready to jump
can
back
take
in?
that over.
Because I think the church will be forever hybrid. I hope it will. We are always able to bring folks in who, for whatever reason, are not able to be there in person. And everybody's a part of the conversation. People on Zoom, people in the room. And that's another skill facilitator needs to have, is always remembering that it's not the room only, it's the room and the Zoom. So that's a skill too, but one that can be learned, and some of you may already have. Probably not the first thing they'll be looking at when they do their interviews. Yes, Andrea?
I like in the schedule that some of the topics that take 2 weeks are just 2 weeks, and then the series, like the Advent and the Lent, those are ones where I feel you could jump in and out a little more easily. But in the past, we've had some series that have been like 4 and 6 weeks, and while they've been good in terms of learning, it's been hard to commit to each one. So I kind of, even though these will be overviews, I kind of like the fact that there are 2. 3 would be good too, but I think some of the ones in the past might have been a little bit long, at least to get all of them, if they build on each other.
I hear you. People will say, why am I going to part 3 if I've missed parts 1 and 2? Right? No, yeah, we talked about that as we planned things. And I hope watching half a film 1 week and then the other half another week will be okay. If someone should come on the second week and this first week, we'll try to bring them up to speed quickly, sort of what you missed last week.
And I think that's going to be useful to emphasize during the Lenten season, because that's the longest stretch of a single topic that we have. The prayer is one that we all know. We recite it every Sunday together. This was my idea, in case anybody was wondering. My vision was to come out of it at the end of the Lenten time with a different appreciation for the prayer, so that on Sunday morning when we all recite it, you're reciting it from a different place of understanding for yourself personally. And that instead of reciting the prayer while you're also thinking about your grocery list, you're reciting the prayer and recalling what you gathered about the prayer from the group and from particularly from yourself during that period of time.
Yeah, thank you for this idea, JS. I think it's truly enriching. And experiential, as you mentioned before, it's really asking us to look within. But also to ask, how do we experience this in our daily living? Today's daily meditation by Father Richard Rohr, I read every day. He says, forgiveness is the whole of the gospel. Beginning, middle, and end of the gospel. And it's also embedded right in the middle of the Lord's Prayer. And we have so many opportunities every day to live, to both fail and succeed and grow in the art of forgiveness. That's just one example, right? 1 week will definitely be on that topic. Well, I won't be here, but I promised Annie Kay and Greg that I will leave a suggested division of those 6 Sundays with some prompting questions. I don't want to over-program my successor either. I've been that successor who was given by the predecessor. This is what you're going to be doing in the next 6 months. That's not very professional, but to have an option to do that, I think will be comforting. I don't know. Any other reflections on 22-23 season?
I think we all realize that how much gratitude we have for you to have strengthened this pre-service period so remarkably in these years. And we don't want to lose it. And so I think we who are here coming regularly will hang in there, as it were, and do our best to support whoever is coming along. I think we sort of pay a pleasure about that.
And at our August gathering, we mentioned the importance of inviting friends, making a personal invitation to friends in the church, well, or outside the church, anybody. And appealing to a younger cohort, which is always important in any group in the church. Really thinking about programs, activities, and structure format that appeal to someone maybe in not a previous generation and the next generation coming up. It's always worth considering.
I think this programming for the coming year is very rich, and I like the emphasis really on more contemporary issues. Very powerful, something you'll like to look at. And I'd like to thank you for all your guidance and advice, because you've been so great with us.
Okay, can we go to part 2 of our agenda for today? We've still got about 20 minutes or so. 15 minutes. Think again about your summer. Think about the people that you met. Concerts, events, activities. Books you read. Events in the world. There have been a few of those. Times alone. Times with others. Times of worship at church or elsewhere. And consider the ways that you've been challenged, that you've grown, that you have realized something new. That you've experienced the holy in a fresh way, perhaps. And I turn it over to you now on Zoom and here at 7:25.
So I have one,
Yes, Chuck.
I was sitting in a wonderful wooded library, and was scanning the bookshelf and found a book, and I was looking for something to do that morning. And it was called The Celestine Prophecy. I don't know if you ever heard of this book? It's a fascinating book.
What is it again?
The Celestine Prophecy.
The Celestine.
It's sort of a mystery. It's a mystery of a group of people trying to find this prophecy, which is hidden in parts in Peru. So there's a fun sort of mystery story, but it's a mystery story that I think is written to allow you to explore the prophecy itself rather than the mystery. And the prophecy is one that focuses on the importance of relationships that you have when you meet people. And it's all about positive energy and trying to supply positive energy to your meeting with other people. And one of the theories is that when people gather, there is an exchange of energy, and the exchange of energy relates around a negative and positive way of looking at life. And that is capturing energy from others so that you can have more energy, or giving energy to others to allow them to have more energy and feel more positivity about themselves. It's a fascinating kind of thought about how to look at encounters that you have with people, and chance relationships and chance encounters, and how to take advantage of these opportunities that you have when you meet other people. So I just found it a tremendously revealing kind of way to look at life in terms of trying to always supply positive energy to any interaction that you have with others. Anyway, so it's a fun mystery, and it talks about a way to get more out of life. Others might profit from the prophecy.
And it was serendipitous.
It's extraordinarily serendipitous. I mean, I just happened to be in this. It was a beautiful sunny morning, sitting in this wooded library, and somehow I was drawn to this book. I can't explain to you how it happened.
How was it spelled?
What?
C-E-L-E-S.
Yeah, Celestine. Yes.
Thank you, Chuck. Who else had an experience worth sharing this summer? Marcy?
I had over 2 months of worry and knowledge, and all the doctors thought so, that I had cancer. When I had the biopsy, I was going to cry again, and the doctor called, and he said it's not cancer. And he said it. I kept saying, please say it again. Say it again. And then I got down as close as I could on my knees and prayed a prayer of thanksgiving. I knew it was God's hand. It was an incredible moment, and weeks, and I'm so grateful that I am not facing what so many other people have.
That's wonderful.
And we celebrate with you.
Oh, yes.
We're great.
And now I have to figure out ways to cause more trouble.
You have a few more years to do so.
Oh, I'm going to try.
Good trouble.
Good trouble.
Getting good trouble.
Yes.
Thank you, Marcy. Yes, Paul?
Three things came to mind. One, played a fair amount of golf this summer. Chuck's usually accompanying me. And we played at a course called Fox Lake, and on the second hole, a fox showed up. And kind of followed us along for 2 or 3 holes. And it was just great, interacting with nature. And another time we encountered a group of sandhill cranes. And you're out there playing golf, and all of a sudden nature reveals itself, and it's wonderful when that happens. The second thing was we went to the Chautauqua Institution that was done for many years. Has anybody else been there?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh, of course. We had lunch with the Smiths. But went to the session while we were there where it was about saving democracy. And the lesson I came away from it was to the point of how to interact with people who don't see things the way you do, is that 98% of their lives is just like your life. Focus on that 98%, not the 2% where you have some disagreement, but reach out. And if you can enter a sense of community through those other things, then it's easier to, if it comes up, talk about things without having the adversarial relationship to begin things with. And the third thing was our son getting married to a beautiful young woman with Pastor Jeffrey conducting the ceremony. It was the most marvelous day and a half or whatever. It was just joyous, absolutely joyous, wonderful time. And we keep talking about it. It was just wonderful. I think you agree. It was a beautiful day.
I'd like to note the wedding itself was not a day and a half.
Nor was the message.
I'll piggyback on Paul because we were all at Chautauqua a couple of weeks before Salman Rushdie was attacked. Chautauqua is one of the things that I think draws us and draws the students that there all the time is this sense of peace and comfort. Your cars are parked away in a parking lot, so there's no traffic noises. Most of the people that you're interacting with have either been or are going to a concert or a lecture that you've been there. Conversation flows easily. And to have that pristine location and experience shattered by one person with revenge mode has troubled me. I know that at this point you can't enter the auditorium without a clear bag, and I'm sure there will be other changes. And but that it's just such a vivid change from this day to that day, and I have been troubled with what that means for our not only Chautauqua society but our society.
But I think there's been a renewed commitment to finding peace and tranquility and interchange and resolve of that. So we're not going to be intimidated. We're going to be better, even better. Good came out of it.
You mean at Chautauqua
At Chautauqua.
in particular? Doubling down
Yeah,
on the mission.
yeah, exactly.
I'd like to make sure anybody on Zoom who'd like to share a spiritual insight has a chance to do so.
Well, I think there is still hope for the world.
Good.
Well, I am impressed by some of the young women in my life through extended family, not my own daughter-in-laws, but extended family that they both had babies this summer, and they both seem to embrace and rise to their new responsibility with grace and happiness and a lot more energy than I remember having, but perhaps I had it then. So that's exciting. And one actually was very nice because it was my niece, my brother's oldest daughter. And so in that family, that's the first grandchild that my brother would have had. My brother died 5 years ago. So it kind of brings him back to life.
Thanks, Andrew.
One of my experiences, and I had many, but it's ongoing right now, and it takes place between 3 people, 2 of whom are here, Jeffrey and myself, and the third is Carol Jansen. And it involves putting together a training program to train new care and calling ministers for that ministry within the church. And we come to view care and calling from 3 different perspectives, and yet it's all pretty much the same when you get right down to what the ministry is all about and how it's performed and the impact that it has, and the best way, quote unquote, to be a care and calling minister. We all end up arriving at pretty much the same conclusion from 3 different perspectives. And it's a reminder to me that these little boxes that I'm looking at on Zoom with people's faces are in a sense an illusion, because the underlying issues in terms of our hearts and spirits and intentions are apparently all aligned.
Thank you, JS. I appreciate working with you and Carol on care and calling training, because you both bring a spiritual commitment to the ministry, to the training, and that it's not just, we try to go deeper than just the how to do it. We try to speak to spiritual values and making that heart-to-heart connection with others, the divine connection with others. And you and Carol really bring that forward. Thank you.
Well, there is the passion that flows from each of the 3 of us is united. And I think that shows up in how we present the material. It starts looking very different initially, but by the end of the training program, it's my hope that each participant in the program will realize that it doesn't matter what perspective you start from, the passion is all coming from the same place.
Thank you.
I am reminded daily that we turn on and come living the morning TV schedule. They always list whose birthday, whose 65th or 70th wedding anniversary, all those joyful things. And then the deaths that day or the day before, or who has now been transferred to Brandel for Axelson. And the COVID ranking right now, we have 2 in independent living, 6 in Axelson. Daily reminders of how important it is to keep going when we have the strength to do so. And that is a reminder every day where we live, right there on the TV screen, that sums up the situation we are in. And then all the programs that are there to keep us vital and interesting. It is an absolute bouquet of life telescoped in 6 minutes. And who else has that?
It sounds like a spiritual practice.
It's a wow. And if you miss it, somebody says, you heard about thus and so? And I said, no, well, it was on TV. Click. Stay in touch is my summation of what this summer has reminded me of. And as I do my garden, which is 10 by 15 feet, which I have reseeded and worked with, and the tree coming down in it, And I stopped the saw, which was going to destroy the garden, just like that, because there's a dead tree in the middle of this spread I have. And the response immediately by maintenance that, no, don't do that. He was stepping in the middle of my impatience. This beautiful spread of pink and white that I have put down there. And immediately they're responsive. So not only does the TV remind me and all of us how care we are given there, but the human beings who do that listen. And I think listening is one of the greatest gifts you can give anyone.
Excuse me, sorry. We have a couple minutes if there's one more reflection about spiritual insight over the summer. Ellen?
Mine has been very simplistic. I spent a lot of time outside my garden. And I'm in awe of the constant resilience of life in all its respects and facets. And how it can't be stopped. It's an ongoing situation all the time, all new growth and death. And I spent time, Tom and I spent time going down to orchestral concerts, and music concerts at Millennium Park downtown and at Northwestern University. And I'm just in awe of how man can create such beautiful things in life. That gives me great joy. And also, when I came to the door by the parking lot this morning, I was struck by, because I think as I get near the ending chapters of my life, I think of the importance of time, and it's constantly brought up to me by my health, different situations. And I thought, why, and I was beginning to examine, why am I here? How am I spending this hour? I have to go to church. And I thought how beautiful the structure is and all the people who have created it. And I heard the organ, and it was playing an English tune, possibly in honor of the Queen and her 70 years on the throne, and her example to all of us of kindness and strength, fortitude. And then I came in here and I thought of the community and how much all of you mean to me, and all the ideas and all the thoughts and all the joys and hopes and all the experiences. That's quite I wasn't over comments on this now, but that's the
Well, that's a very fitting conclusion too. Thank
I
you.
hope it's not too concluding. I can see about the future.
Concluding for today. And yeah, the spiritual is just always breaking through in daily living, but and have that awareness, that willingness to be spoken to. Be well, friends. See you soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh,